Okay. I'm making sure. There we go. Okay, it says that I'm live. This is Dean here with Burn 1. What is up, my White Schwartz Meisters? I want to be going over RWBY first. Sound check. How does the sound, sound right now, right? I know that in the past I've had some microphone issues. I worked on fixing that. I believe that I've done a good job. On the videos that I pre-recorded before this, I believe it was good, so. Can I get a audio's good in the chat? Oh, we had 3 people leave at once. Oh, no. Is the audio that bad? That I've done a good job. On the videos that I pre-recorded before this, I believe it was good, so. No, the audio. Can I get a audio's good? Okay, there we go. So, whatever. If people join, they join. So basically what I'm going to be doing is I want to give like a high-level overview of the entirety of the RWBY set. From start to finish, basically. Starting with level 0, I want to go over the combos, I want to go over the finishers, and the different climax combos you can run, and the viability, I think, for each of them. Because I feel like a lot of RWBY lists are playing some cards that I do think there are better alternatives for. Zatch Bell's a good show. Can't wait for the reboot. So first I think I'm going to go over the level 0 line. I hope that this camera looks good enough. So 0 has a lot of really good things to bring in RWBY, right? There's a lot of different zeros you can run. Some of them less common than the others. Okay, I think these all kind of like go together. I think all 3 of these are basically the same card. And then these are like memes. Okay, so when it comes to RWBY, the zeros are actually an extremely important part of the deck. I actually forgot to bring out the drop searcher. And I want to kind of talk about the viability of each of them, right? So RWBY has 3 different clock plussing zeros. Realistically, you only get to play one of these. We have Liren the Clock Bomb, who's a top check 3, put 1 into clock. So this helps color fix. It's a removal tool. And it's a card that you can attack with on the first turn. Like, if you go second, right, you get to attack with this card. And then still get the plus. And unlike a lot of things, it doesn't, it's not like an on-reverse Ricky. So it can be played over for the plus. And if it gets minus power, it still gets the effect. However, it does lose the bottom deck bombs. It's quite unfortunate. This is the Krista, Amber Fallen Maiden. This card is terrible, but it is played in the Cinder package. This one is not Nico's PR. I still need his. I will have 3 once I get his. So this one's quite insane. By insane, I mean it's just insanely bad. Terrible, but it's fulfilled for the memory requirement for the Cinder. If you don't play this card in the Cinder package, you just have a 8K on reverse combo that's absolutely terrible. And then for decks that you don't want to play the Liren in, maybe if you don't want to play the clean cut, right? Because the Liren goes in a deck with a clean cut sometimes. But if you don't want to play either of those, you can play the Sun Wukong. He's pretty good. On reverse, top check 2. Add both if they're characters. Just a decent plussing option, and because he comes into play at 4K, he can get reverses even against a lot of level 1s, against non-standby decks, because those usually sit around 4 or 5 power, so this is about 5K after climax. All in all, I think that, like, if this wasn't required for the Cinder package, I don't think anyone would actually play this. And I don't even think the Cinder package is good, and I'm going to be talking about that later. Climax Swapper, I think everyone knows that you need to play this in order for consistency. I don't really want to talk about that anymore. Later down the line, these are Brainstorms. Nora is just a generic tap self-salvage, and not really much to talk about. There's also Spammable. I don't like Spammables in this deck, because I don't think the set needs the amount of mill that a Spammable provides, and I do think it needs the hand fixing, but I want to go over that with this card. I do like this one, though. This is a draw Brainstorm that gives hand encore to middle. It mills 5, which helps with your deck speed. There is, in standard builds of RWBY, you'll find that like deck speed is there, but also it's like all gate kept to climax combos. So there are times that you need to mill your deck, but you really can't. This 5-card Brainstorm, believe it or not, helps because if you hit a climax, let's say you hit like 1 or 2 off of it, right? That the 7 cards milled, 6 to 7 cards milled. Hand Encore to middle is very important in specific builds of the deck where you want to be turning cards into the cards that are already on your board and helping develop bigger boards. It can also help certain like standby builds keep key cards that don't inherently have Hand Encore. So all in all, I think the this one's very important. This one, not so much. Don't really need to talk about it later either. Zwei is a double filter. He pretty much competes with like all the other filter cards in the set and is interchangeable with the Ironwood. The difference is the Zwei usually costs stock to fix hand, which is the downside to it. However, the Ironwood is terrible. This card is one of the worst cards I have played in a long time. The filter ability is cool until you realize this eats a spot on your board. This card is 500 power. Even post-climax, it doesn't even trade with an Azusa, right? Azusa's got 2k stat line. Ironwood's got 1500. This card is a joke. It's very difficult to justify playing it in the mid-game, too, because the plus is non-selective. You would rather play a stock on something like a Zwei than you would on getting a level 0 out of grave to be forced to crash 3 lanes with an Ironwood. There's other times that the Ironwood filter is required to get a power pump from something like a clean cut in the mid-game, in which case you put down an Ironwood, which is losing a lane by default, to then play down a clean cut, which is probably losing a lane because you needed the power pump to pump the 1 lane you do actually get, or you're leaving a stranded card in the back row. All in all, I find the Ironwood is a very clunky, rough card to play. But a lot of people swear by it, but I honestly think it's probably what's hurting them the most in the long run. Zwei, pretty okay. Not the best. The drop search ability is nice, but it's eh. We have the Neon Cat as well as an option. A lot of decks are vying to play this. The only problem with this is it is a completely dead card post-turn 1 to 2. It does not feel good to put down, like we just said with the Ironwood. Sometimes you need to put down a clean cut, or you need to put down like a random utility card, and you need that for the mill, you need that for the power. And this Neon Cat's just sitting here clogging your hand, and if you're trying to use it as like an extension of your hand by using the coin flip, right? Because sometimes with like other coin flips, you put them in the back row, and then it just bounces back to hand, so that way you can go over a 7-card hand. This one just like doesn't really do it too well. And it's not as good as you would think, especially with Kaguya going down. Like, runners and chasers aren't as important to answer, right? If you don't answer a chase, your opponent only goes +1. It's not like it was with Kaguya, where if you didn't answer the K, they would go +2 or 3, right? Like, they get insane value off of it. So this card's not as good right now, I don't think. But it's still good. You don't feel bad about playing it. I think it vies for spots with this. This is the Mill Runner from the TD. It swings in at 4k as long as it milled 2 characters, helps with your deck speed. All in all, an okay option, but it's like kind of like the Neon Cat. It doesn't feel as good as some of the other options, right? Half of the time, I would rather field a Lee Ren, and if my opponent kills it, I can grab the Lee Ren back or another 0 to push further advantage. So I think that runners are a little bit wonky right now. Clean Cut. I want to go over this one because I think this card is highly overrated, but also I think that's mostly because of the builds that people play and the targets that they provide themselves for this card. And the Pyrrha, I mean, you have to play this if you're playing the RWBY package. I think anything less than 4 is wrong. You'll find that it is quite difficult to get one of these into memory the later the game goes on. A lot of the RWBY decks game plans are focused on board, whether it's cracking board or holding board. And in either case, it does not feel good to put this on the board because this is automatically surrendering the lane, right? Because if your goal is to crack 3 lanes of your opponent's board, or even 2 with the RWBY combo, finding a lane to put this on and just give your opponent a plus feels terrible. Versus just other cards, right? Like, so you want to see this early, you want to get this into memory early, and then you want to never play it again, basically. You know, other decks don't feel as bad when they don't win lanes, but RWBY, I think, feels absolutely terrible when it doesn't. Mei Dong, I think this card is really good. It's on level up drop search. If you've ever played this deck, you'll always find that you want like 1 card different in your hand, usually. because the combos, if you play the Gate combo or if you play the Weiss, anything basically except for the Jean combo, you're gonna have like only at the top of your deck for card options. And this card will help you filter those cards that you found off the top of your deck into cards that you want. This can help you find the Weiss 2-1 if you're playing the RWBY level 2 combo, and then transition into finding an extra copy of the Cinder, or maybe you need the Neo. It can just help you find things that otherwise you would have to play a drop searcher for, while still providing utility. Because right, when you put down a drop searcher, you're surrendering that lane. It's not doing anything else for your game plan. This card, you always get the tap, which helps you with your board breaking because it pumps 1500. And then it also synergizes well with the clean cut because it provides more clean cut targets. In a standard list of RWBY, you only have 2 to 3 brainstorms that you play that are good clean cut targets. Otherwise, you go and you clean cut something like a Cinder, you clean cut an Ironwood, and these cards just sit in your back row for the rest of the game doing nothing. It becomes very hard to promote them as the game progresses, unless you are just completely giving up on the lane. While this card can be clean cut to the back row, provide power pumps later, it's like you put down an extra copy of a Yang next turn. And then at 0, we have a couple other cards that you can play. I think these are just more of joke cards. Or like, they're not joke, they're like, this one's a joke, this one's a joke. And this provides top check add, or top check marker. It helps confirm triggers, it's 4K on defense. It's considered like a plussing 0, but it helps into like the consistency of your deck slightly, right? Helps you hit brainstorms. The utility of this type of profile is very nice because the marker is optional. As time has gone on, I think that your 0 lineup can get very clogged with these other cards like the clean cuts and the Piras, that it's not really worth playing this. Ditch Climax Salvage, it's the same. You'd rather just play as Y if you needed a ditch out for a Climax. Like outside of an 8 pants deck, which I don't think RWBY wants to be playing, this card is like not really worth the slots. Now this one is worth the slots because RWBY has almost no stock charging. I think there's one card that's take a card from hand and put it into stock, and that's absolutely terrible. This card sits at 3/5 power on play and it gets on reverse blind stock with a Climax. Easy to pick off a level 1 if you're playing it with the RWBY. Level 1, right? You can pump this thing to 6/5 after Climax, which is pretty nice, and help with some of the stock issues that you may run into in the late game due to the fact that if you're playing the Cinder package, that package requires 7 stock before anything else. If you have to summon a, what is it, Neapolitan that can add 2 to 3 additional stocks, you're looking at 9 to 10 stock on a level 3 turn that is only burn ones, so it's not even that good, right? And a lot of times just natural stock usage throughout the game will horribly cripple that, so it's sometimes nice to include something like this to muted. No, there's no way I'm muted. Oh, I'm being trolled. I'm being trolled. Man, the stock generation from this is pretty nice though. The only problem is you'll find that it's not worth filtering for this card, because if you waste a filter on this, right, it's just, it feels really bad. So then you have to play this in higher counts to have it when you have the Climaxes in hand, in which case it starts eating slots that I feel like you don't really have, which is why I don't really want to talk about that too often. But yeah, so that's the zeros. I don't really want to get too nitty-gritty about too many of them outside of this one later. And the utility of the Yang Clean Cut. Okay, there we go. So, outside of the zeros now, we also have to look at the level 1 combos that we have in the set. We have Weiss, RWBY, Jean, and then there's this Monkey Man. Oh, there's also 2 cigarettes as well. All of these bring a lot of stuff to the table. Believe it or not, even this. I think this is the worst combo by far. 2 cigarettes. Green is a terrible color for the set, so I guess I'll start with the low-hanging fruit. 6K on play. And the mill from this combo is absolutely atrocious. The only relevant thing you can get from this is the 1/1 event, which can help your power lines throughout the game. There's a lot of things in RWBY, because RWBY is like such a board-focused deck, 500 power matters a lot. So being able to play this 1/1 event that just pumps everything by 500 on your turn can help you break boards by like the smallest of margins. But outside of that, you horribly gimp your game plan with the 2 cigarettes combo, so I don't really want to talk about that too much. Weiss is a really good card, 6k, as long as you have trait. I know that currently something that some people... Are you running at least one Iona? What's that? I don't know what the Iona is. This is not like a deck profile. This is like a set overview, and I'm trying to like put into words a lot of my thoughts from testing, and I'll go over like decks after. And I'll definitely be like mentioning the decks throughout this, right? Like I mentioned with the clean cut in Carmen's and Nico's list, where your targets outside of the brainstorms were pretty terrible, right? Like you were able to clean cut a Ricky, well, Cinder, right? Feels terrible. But I know some people are playing trait removal. Oh no. Let me make sure that's still looking good. Yep. Okay. Bump the camera. This is 6k, and it has top check 3. Your opponent gives you one, and then you get to set your trigger. They cannot give you climaxes. This helps with playing standby. More than 8 standby. More than 8 standby. And this thing, having a 6k body, synergizes well with things like this 2/1 support that's a global 1000. So you can have 7Ks in every lane. Threatened 9k backups, which actually threatens Mushoku unless they hit 2 standbys, because the 1/1 plus a 1k is only 8/5. So you can even challenge Mushoku lanes with this card. And then it transitions well into also having the pants, so that if you need a standby for the next turn, you can grab a standby off of a pants trigger that you see. And just generate double pluses. It also synergizes well with the draw brainstorm, because it's a very good hand-on core target. Just given that your opponent may give you something like a coin flip, something is just completely dead, and then you're able to turn it into this big body that you're able to just continuously bring supports out with and progressing your game plan. RWBY, I think this card is both one of the best cards in the set and terrible. This card is a Manami, which means that when it gets reversed, you get top check 4 and give 2k power. It's 6/5 on your turn, 7/5 after climax, and then you get all of the power pumps of the 2k from the clean cut. If you play the Mei Zedong, that's another 1500 you can get from something. The brainstorm has rolling power, so when you get a reverse, you get to give extra power, so this thing can actually pump to 5. And this climax also gives you a second climax combo at level 2. All in all, extremely solid if it wasn't for the fact that you have to find 2 to 3 of these to make it feel good. Which is why I think that this card is a lot better than people give credit for, because if you play 3 copies of this, it synergizes into your board cracking potential of making this bigger than making this able to crack actual boards, and it gives you clean cut targets. So, and it helps you find a second to third copy, because whenever you put this down, since it only top checks 4 on reverse, it's not reliable mill unless you have multiples, right? Like you want to have 2 to 3 copies of this, unless you can find 2 to 3 copies, which by the way, in the 8 gate build, you play this, which only grabs out of grave. So it has terrible selectivity in the early game, especially when you don't have, the spammable is a search brainstorm, but when you don't have like the best selectivity, this card feels terrible, like if you only have 1. But if you have 2, and then if you can get the climax combo off at 2 again, feels very good. The climax combo at 2, by the way, is you power pump on play a card 500 times board, including self, and then you give on attack, on reverse to itself and another character, top check 2, add both. So you can go +4 off of that if you combo it with this. 2 reverses gets you 5 hand, which synergizes well with the stock healer in the set that we'll go over. Also at level 1 we have Jean. I think this is the hardest card to fit into our deck because yellow is kind of ass in this set. It's a really good clean cut target. It synergizes well with clean cut. It power pumps on attack. When you play the climax, you give a card on reverse search, so you're able to like field 2 of these, slam down a clean cut, power pump the clean cut to like 10-5 or something crazy. I think power pump's 2k on attack. 2k. So yeah, you can give what's that, 7k to the clean cut. It could be an 8-5. And then get double searches. And this thing can trigger from the back row, so you can even have 3 of this out when you're doing that. If you have like the absolute god hand, rip 3 cards out of your deck, clean cut 1 to the back. Seems really good. The problem is like all the other yellow cards are just terrible. There's almost nothing in yellow outside of the Yang top end and the clean cut that really like, right? Like there's a lot of blue and red cards that make you want to play blue and red at one. But there's no yellow cards outside of maybe the dad. And then we also have the Monkey Man. He comes out if you have 4 or more on board. He's a 7k, 8k with the climax. The nice thing about him is he sacks the climax at the end of his attack, so you only need 1 copy of this card. You can mill down to 0 cards left in deck, which is kind of important against some matchups, right? There's RWBY in the meta now. 8 standby, some people play, where they play the Pyrrha level 3, which shuffles cards back in. I know there's a couple other decks that might be able to shuffle cards back in. And just generally, when you leave yourself with like 1 card left in deck to have a good refresh, you always are giving your opponent 1 extra damage, right? Or it's like they stacked a card on top of your deck. Well, with this, because you sack the climax before you top check at the end, you can attack with all your guys, sack the climax goes back in, mill the rest of your deck, and then have the dudes on your board go to grave. It also synergizes well with the Pyrrha Bomb, because you don't have to like, right? Pyrrha Bomb plus this is a little awkward, because you want to be winning lanes with this RWBY. And this card loses lanes inherently because it's a bomb. It's what it wants to do. It wants to lose the lane. This card doesn't feel as bad because it doesn't like conflict with the game plan of these 2. So that's it for the combos. I think that like it's kind of like the order that I put them in. I think the Weiss combo has the most longevity in the current meta. I think this card has a lot of things that you can do with it that are super good. It provides deck speed all of the time instead of being tied to a reverse. This blue provides a lot for the set, and it helps it find its climax over multiple turns. If you've ever played the 8-gate list, sometimes it's hard to find the gate on the second turn, right? You got this 2-1 that's insane, you've got this RWBY that like cracks boards, but then how do you find the climax on the following turn? Because you're playing the gate trigger, and you just kind of have to draw it, right? It's a little rough. And Jean's cool, but yellow's not. Like, yellow is not, and I feel like the boards you set up with him aren't even as good as this thing. Because at least this, like, opens up deck space and kind of doesn't care what else happens. It just gets to do it regardless. Well, this guy, he's got to get the, you've got to have a card get the reverse, and it's a little more awkward. Well, this provides you mill. You can play a lot of utility cards with it, so it's actually not that bad. I honestly thought this card was unplayable. I threw all of this away when I opened because I think it's a common. That was scary. I had a... Okay, good. Okay, good. Yeah. So this card is decent, but it's also like a little rough with a lot of the climax combos you play, right? If you're playing Weiss, you want to hold board. If you're playing RWBY, you want to crack board. It does work with cracking the board. So I guess that's like fine. Now this is not a meme. This is actually what made me make this a stream. Is I really wanted to defend this as well. Dust. This is the best event in RWBY. If you've played this set and you feel Ironwood, right? You put down that 500 power filter card, and then you go and you can only grab a clean cut or something, and then you put down like right, because like let's say you have like a brainstorm already on the board. This is not uncommon, and then like you need either combo or power pump, and then you put down the ironwood, and then your ironwood grabs you a clean cut. You only have 2 spaces left on the board. And it feels terrible. It feels absolutely terrible to get any form of filter in this set. And this ironwood can't even grab you the cards you want half of the time. And then another thing I found is outside of the spammable, sometimes it is very difficult in the set to pay out stock in a meaningful way that isn't just pay 3 Encore or finding a second Brainstorm. Dust fixes it all. Shopkeep actually isn't that bad. It's just a vanilla. I mean, people out here playing the Bunny Girl stock charge engine, right? It's like the 103k that surrenders board. While Dust is a 1-0 event, you play it down. You can either discard the Shopkeep or pay 2 stock, and then top check 5, add 2. So it's either pay 2 stock to +1 while milling 5 cards, which adds to your deck speed. That's not tied to a climax combo. It's not tied to crashing. That's like the worst thing about the set. You either play a spammable Brainstorm and pay 4 stock to mill. You crash Puras, which you can only do as long as they're not a memory, so you can only do it like once per game. Or you just sit on your deck and die. This provides you enough deck speed that you can refresh like 4. I've refreshed 4 in this set. Instantly, immediately refresh my deck the following turn. Sometimes you get the double trigger in the early game. Still doesn't feel bad. The Shopkeep or the Dust event allows you to pay that out and get pluses along the way, and then helps you field into a meaningful board. And I think that's the most important thing, is it helps you not eat up board slots. Everything else in this set, all of the other filter, all of the other utility tools that help you fix things, eat up a board slot. But you want your board to be power pumps and board breakers. So this is the only way you can filter deck in hand. It's basically like playing Pot of Greeds in your deck, right? Because you're turning the card in your hand into 2 cards you want. I guess it's closer to an Allure of Darkness or a trade-in. It's like playing the trade-in package, right? For our Yu-Gi-Oh fans. And yeah, I see the guy says he likes the Shopkeep package. I understand. This was something it took me a while to sleeve, and once I did, I felt this set got infinitely better. Like, this is something actually unique to this set. Very good. We just have like counters. I mean, it's worth mentioning that you have an option between a Leafa counter and a 2K, depending on what you think your stock expenditure will be. You do have the options. Both are good with the Weiss package. They can be good with the Sun, and then they're less good with the other packages. Because like RWBY is good at cracking board, but then you instantly surrender board. It's kind of like, depends on what your game plan is. Nolan, MVP for Nico and Carmen. I was a heavy proponent of this card when I first saw it, but I think that with Dow losing their Field Swapper, Slime being able to pay 3 Encore Gelds, this card is less good than it's ever been. I don't think it's like worth like a slot if you want to, but I don't think it really stops that much, right? Mushoku gets Twin Drive on like every attack. They just stand by to the front row. You put down a Nolan, and then you crash into their 2/2, and their 2/2 just direct attacks you, right? It's kind of what ends up happening with this card. You're not really stopping anything. You bottom deck a Slime player's card, and then they sack their Geld and pay 3 Encore. One of your other lanes. It just doesn't feel as good as it used to. Winter kills 2/2s. I think this profile is okay, but I also feel like it's really bad. I'm not actually 100% sure on this. I know some people like it, some people don't. Adam Taurus, I think this card works better with this profile, because like I said, this profile feels better when you're fielding something like this bomb. So you're able to use the bomb to get a reverse, and then you're able to eat the bomb and then turn this into a plus as well as getting you a memory. I thought it was just worth mentioning. It's nice that it's on trade. I think this is the only profile like this in English. I know it's in Mob, but Mob's only hits like a third of the set, and it's terrible. I think it whiffs on Reagan's, which are your best early plays, so it's terrible in Mob, but it's actually pretty good in this, having played with it a bit. I don't think it makes like a meta list. I don't think you're going to bring this one to a regional, but try it out with locals, right? And Neptune. Neptune's insane. Power pumps and bottom decks. It helps field into the board breaking potential of an 8 gate list. I think that the fact it bottom decks though is a little awkward because half of the time, like if this thing was like a reverser, yeah, sure, your opponent could encore their cards, but it would help like fuel other combos, right? It would help fuel this. It would help your power pumps from your brainstorms. But yeah, I also don't know how relevant a card like this is though right now. If you look at the current meta, standby decks running rampant, they're going to be putting down these massive bodies for free. You invest a stock into it. The power pump is nice, but also how much does the bottom deck actually hurt them? Against some other decks like Love Life Sunshine, it can hurt until they top check the Yo that you bottom decked and then kill you with that card. So that's it for the ones. Now, level 2s, I don't think anything's like super good in the set. Like super good. We have a lot of assist options and we have some terrible counters. The Rabbit, I think this card is really good in a Weiss standby package, which is my current list that I think is the best. Having the global 1K and being a brainstorm helps you free up slots for other utility cards and having additional assists, while still giving you selectivity of a brainstorm without the expensive power. It's also just a decent body. We have the Jean assist. He's going to be played in your standby builds because he synergizes with the Pyrrha, helps the Pyrrha stick around, gives her hand encore. Overall, really good. Gives her 2k extra power as well, 500 if she's in a different lane. The swapping ability I don't think is good at all, though, as I don't think you would ever play this choice with the standby in any even semi-coherent deck. Cinder is the assist of choice for Carmen and Biko. I think it's absolutely terrible because it puts this thing into memory. The problem with this card is, like I said, when you play this, there's an actual opportunity cost. You lose the ability to play Lee Ren. Well, you don't lose the ability to, but they start vying for slots, and I think that Lee Ren provides so much more for the deck. Like, let's say you're going second into a normal like deck, right? And let's say that if you're not playing this card, it means you're playing this card, right? Because this card would go to memory instead. And you can play this even if you're not playing the RWBY package. If you start off with these two, you can slap down a third card. It does not matter what the third card is. You can like comfortably tri-field off of these two cards in hand. If this card is in your hand, like let's say that Lee Ren is this, you cannot tri-field. You can like barely dual field without it feeling terrible. At least that's kind of the way I feel. Well, this like just like lets you play a very aggressive zero game if you need to. I feel like this thing does not. It makes your cans a little clunkier. Outside of that, it power pumps as long as this thing's in memory, and this thing's always in memory if you're playing this. And it's a 2k assist to level 3, so it helps the Blake early play hold board in meaningful ways, right? 3-2 early play comes out 13k behind this assist. Pretty decent. Kind of hard to answer. Some standby decks can, but if you have a counter, right, things basically unanswerable. And then for counters of choice, we have like 3 different things. We have a free fresh counter. It's okay. I feel that, as you see in this set, there's not a whole lot of stock generation, and there's a lot of very expensive packages across the board in this. Like, while the finishers themselves are light on stock, playing something like this down to put this into memory, and then in like Carmen's list, right? And then to put down the 2-1 Weiss to go with the RWBY. That's 2 stock for the turn. That's almost a full turn cycle worth of stock. And then putting 3 stock on top of that would make it actually very difficult for you to meet your stock thresholds. So I feel like the free fresh counter, little rough. Memory shoe counter, very good against like specifically jank. I don't know like anything, like I guess Bang Dream, right? Bang Dream's got the at end of attack go to memory, bring out another card. So this would stop that. It's good against 8 choice slime, which is it's like a rogue option, but I don't know many people that are on that right now. And what, like Sunder packages and stuff like that. Like a lot of old stuff it's okay against. I would almost rather play this over this, because I feel like this is going to save you in like those really jank matchups or Bang Dream more than anything. An anti-change counter, I think anti-change isn't in a good spot right now. 8 standby decks just put too many things on board for 3 stock in one hand to be worth the resources, but it can sometimes come in handy if you are playing it. And then this is something I don't agree with Carmen. M-Kick is good against Bangry for other reasons as well. Yeah, it is pretty good. I don't know what else it does against Bangry. I guess you can like kick the Choo-Choo, right? Or Pero or whoever. I don't know. The thing that gives their early play like infinite power. Anti-change. I don't like anti-change at all. This card, I feel like, is a win harder card. You have to win literally every lane. If you do not win every lane, this card does nothing. If your opponent plays bounce, this card does nothing. If your opponent plays trait deletion, which is popular, this card does nothing. This card is absolutely terrible. Even in a standby focus deck with the Pyrrha that sits at like 16k, you sometimes have stuff on your board get scaled. And this card is terrible. This card does not stop on attack effects. So if your opponent hits you with like an Icy Tail, you're just eating the Icy Tail, right? If it's awful. Kick the Choo-Choo and the 2-1 loses everything. Yeah. I mean, well, also sometimes you can kick the 2-1 and then like the 3-2 loses enough power that it just dies. It also loses the Hexproof, which is kind of nice. This thing is all. Oh yeah, Bang Dream has the Hexproof 3-2, right? So you can't even use that against it. This card is just all in all, I think, pretty terrible. I hate this anti-damage. I think it's a wasted slot. That I just don't think it goes with the set. I don't think it does very well with the set. This is a 2-2 standby target. I don't think this is even playable. I think if you're playing standby, you'd rather play these. Unless you're playing 8 standby, but I don't think 8 standby is a good play, because I think the RWBY combo is absolutely garbage, and there is no reason for you to play 4 if it's Climax. And I'll go over my deck at the end too. I just wanted to kind of like give an overview of everything first. Stock Healer. Stock Healer's great. Comes out 2 or less. You need good deck control. Why I champion this card so hard. Because the 2 or less condition sometimes in other builds can be hard to meet. But if you're playing this Dust package and you're playing like a deck that has a lot of deck control, you're able to turbo through your deck, play these down, and make this more of your game plan. Because this healer is very good as long as you can support it. When you can't support it, it's very mediocre. Right? The 2 or less condition can be awkward. But when it's not awkward, this card is a house. 11k body, heals, very good. This is like basically a level 2, so I'm just not talking about that. Now let's look at the level 3 options though, right? We got the finishers, we got to talk about what really goes into them. And there's also this Mocha. Okay, so first I guess I'll start with the Mocha. The Mocha's unplayable. It's got a nice pants trigger. But outside of that, the finishing power of this thing is not very good. It doesn't heal, and it just basically tells your opponent, please stock swap me, because I put a Climax on top of my deck, hoping to get another turn. But now, as far as like finishing power, right? We have 2 combos that require our opponent to hold board. Cinder and RWBY both want your opponent to have a board, which is why a lot of them tend to slot in the Neo, which adds 2 to the overall stock thresholds of these decks. Cinder needs your opponent to not only win board against your mid game, but also provide you a reverse on against a 12k, I guess 14, 15, up to 15.5 body. The power lines on it aren't too bad. It's just that burn 1 is not very good. It's like, right, it's just like very mediocre as far as finishing power goes. The top deck is kind of nice. The heal is nice, But having to play the package and lose the consistency at 0, I feel is like a huge hindrance to the deck. And I feel like RWBY doesn't leverage the gate trigger very well. If you think about it this way, right? When you play gate trigger, you lose soul triggers. Because a lot of the other climaxes, right? Standby decks have soul triggers. Well, Choice does not, but like Pants does. A lot of the other climaxes have soul triggers, while the gate does not. And unless you're leveraging the salvage from the gate, this trigger is not as good as you would think. That's kind of how I feel about that card. I think it's just overall very mediocre, not very good. The RWBY is a little nicer because it does dodge combat. So a lot of the counters, like right, Mushoku has a tap counter. They also have the Paul, or I think that's his name, whatever the dad is, that can just like burn you. So you get to dodge all of that garbage with this. If you're playing against the other people's RWBY's lists, they might be trying to play the Cinder package where you're able to just clock kick it to completely deny them an anti-damage. And then it gets a burn 3, which is nice because if you play a standby, otherwise swings for 3 are not guaranteed. Swings for 2 are, though. But like I said, both of the problems with these are they require your opponent to at no point, or like to consistently fight for board and at no point let off the gas. Unless you slot into Neo, and then slotting into Neo is an additional search, an additional hand sculpt, 2 extra stock. Neither of these search for their climax on their own. So unless you're holding the climax, this could even add 3 whole extra stock to the top end, which I do want to also say that with these top ends, what was that? What was that? I think we're back. I don't know what that was. Okay, wow, I apologize for these issues. I find the stock thresholds though a little awkward. Love throttled internet. Yeah, it's pretty rough. It's pretty rough out here. But I wanted the communication because I feel like I'm going over a lot, and if anything's not clear, right, I definitely want to fix that at the end. And I also I think I'm being pretty controversial because I know a lot of people rate the Gate level 3, like the Cinder package, highly. Well, I think it's awful. I think the anti-damage is awful. I think this thing is awful. And then I'm championing things like the Mei Dong and the Dust package, so I wanted to definitely clarify such things. Pyrrha is insane. This is the best card for elongated games. It helps leverage the early play here. It helps leverage the Weiss package. Basically, this card just says, when it comes into play via this standby, you can pay 2, sack the standby, which is good. It means if you're on a 1-card deck, you get to play this, it gets put back in. And then shuffle 5 cards back into, X cards, where X is the number of your trait on board. So if you have a full board after playing this, it's 5 cards back into your opponent's deck, and then they shuffle. A lot of people on their level 1 combos will leave 1 card left in deck, right? Because they want to mill down, get the good refresh. This horribly punishes that, right? You shuffle 5 back in, that's 6 free damage on the top. Almost a full level. And it just hard punishes. It can like completely slingshot the game in your favor while just crippling them. This card is massive. It's a 1500 to everything in the front row or everything on your board as long as it's in the front row. The Jean gives it hand on court, and more importantly, this is why I like this draw brainstorm. This can give it hand on court. So you can, hand on court this one turn, get a turn of attacks, and then do another standby, have 2 of these out, and then they're probably big enough to actually hold board after that. 11-5 by itself, not good enough. But with all of the support behind it, this card becomes an absolute powerhouse that is very hard for your opponent to deal with. I hear that Hololive is getting a similar profile soon, but until Hololive comes out, this is probably the best you're going to get in English for a standby target in the game. I almost think this is like the best standby combo you can get currently in English. I know there's like a lot of insane stuff coming out. But yeah, we see there's like a lot of defensive top ends in RWBY. Not a whole lot to actually kill people. As far as the best top end for killing people, I think the Yang, which is top check 3 on play, so it helps you find the climax and lets you play loose, right? Like you can play more aggressively with your hand, while some of those other combos you almost can't. You feel like you have to like hold the combo pieces. You got to hold the climax for the level 3s. You've got to find multiple copies of it. This, since it top checks 3, you can play with less things in hand and find them off the top. With choice, you give another card cancel burn 2. Ideally, you do 2 of this and 1 of the restander from the trial deck. This provides you 4 attacks for 3, because this thing always gets to restand, and it swings in big enough, it will generally avoid memory shoot counters. Play this last on a full board with the climax, it's 15-5. If you can't find a lane where 15-5 is going to live, then I feel like some other horrible things have happened in your game. So yeah, 4 swings for 3 and then 2 swings for 2, because you get the burn 2s on the cancels. Very good at rounding out 7 damage. It also provides you the utility of side attacks. If you hit like a soul trigger after the restand, you can get like maybe a side attack on a level 3 for a 1, or if they leave you like scattered levels on the board, restanders are always very nice at punishing those board configurations. And as a side note, in a lot of other RWBY decks, this is a very nice package. This is a 3/2 RWBY that on play salvages a card and has pay 2, ditch 2 at the end of its attack, burn 2. Well, we just went over this as a restander. It doesn't need a reverse, just on the turn it's played pay 2, ditch 2, restand. Off of 4 stock at the beginning of your turn, as long as you have the additional hand, you can attack with this, restand it, attack with it again, attack with this, pay out all the 4 stock that you generated in the turn to get 5 attacks without a climax. And sometimes with the shuffle back in this to decompress, it can be nice. Or just if you whiff the climax in a different deck, right? Like if you're playing like the Cinder package, you can't find the level 3 climax. Slapping down this can get you 5 attacks and sometimes help seal the game that otherwise would have been lost. And because this salvage is on play, you don't even have to hold this card as long as it's like somewhere in grave or it's somewhere in stock from earlier in the game. And then we've got a couple other level 3s to talk about. I don't think that these are super worth playing. There's the Glinda. I know I saw this mentioned earlier in the chat. It heals on play. It's nice because it's yellow. And as we talked about earlier, yellow doesn't have a whole lot going on. And the Yang level 3 does not heal. So it does provide that. It has pay 1, ditch 1, gain 2k, and on reverse burn 1. I don't like that you have to pay before knowing if you can get the reverse. And I don't like that the burn 1 is tied to the reverse, but as a healer and like a secondary source of damage, it's not terrible. This is just like one of those cards that gets 4 or 5 on play and then tries to crack board. I think these profiles are okay. Some people like them more than others. It depends on how focused you are at winning board on offense. The 4 or more condition is nice, but it does conflict with this. So, you know, probably wouldn't feel too bad playing it, but it is also, yeah. Weiss, this goes with the standby package. The problem with it is, I just think there's better standby targets than this card. It lets you check your triggers before attacks. Let's say you're going to go for the RWBY top end, right? You can move. Yeah, the art is terrible on these. All the RWBY rares are awful. Varying levels. I think this one's... No, the Mocha's the worst. This thing. The Blake is worse than this. But you get to look at the top 2 cards of your deck. So, right, like let's say you're thinking, do I do double RWBY combo or single? You see a climax in top 2, you move it down. You do double combo. If you see clean cards, you could opt for double combo, or single combo plus double attack in order to move the non-climax cards out of your deck. And the 2k, but like the other assists just come out earlier, right? Like you get to put them out earlier, and then you're not fighting for this assist at level 2 versus your finishers, right? Instead of in like standbying out a Pyrrha or standbying out the RWBY level 3, you're standbying out this. And I just think this card is not very good because of that. And it's competing against the 2/1 Jean, it's competing against the Rabbit, it's competing against the Cinder assist, all of which I think are better than this card. Ironwood, good, but once again, a lot of the RWBY top ends want you to hold board. They want your opponent, they want you to be able to break a board that's been broken, right? That broke your board, because they want to, RWBY wants to clock hit cards on your opponent's board after they've killed your cards. Cinder wants to be able to reverse the cards that killed your cards in the previous turn, and this thing bouncing a card sometimes can help that, but as we saw with a lot of those top ends, you have a lot of slots on things like the Neo, and there's a lot of stock thresholds on such cards. This card, it can be included, but it's also a little rough. So, that's kind of like a broad overview. I didn't really get into decks. I just kind of talked about cards. Does anyone, like, have any questions about this? Or should I go over the deck that I've been playing in detail now as well? Okay, well, I'll throw in a deck profile. No questions. Yeah, everyone just agrees with the fact that Ironwood is a terrible card, and Mei Dong is the best card in the game. Okay, let's hear the question. Question to come out. Oh no. Let's actually find the deck. See, if I was smarter, I would have prepared for this earlier. There's just like no questions. Alright, I guess he's typing. Deck profile looks cool. It took a lot of iterations. I felt like the Weiss Pants being able to like play into a standby board was probably one of the more unique things about the set. I know Bang Dream can do similar, but being locked into Pop and Party can be a little rough. Because like the Pop and Party cards are all terrible outside of the Japanese promos. What do you replace with the Shopkeep event build? I think there's a lot of cards you can like cut. Like I only play one Ironwood in my list because you don't need as much filter when you have access to the Shopkeep event. You can cut the spammable because like you only need plussing brainstorms at that point. A lot of your mill can just come from that event. Utility level ones, like right, like you get a more narrow game plan. It's kind of like, oh, do I think that Neon should be in all RWBY builds? I actually think this card is terrible as well. Yeah, so Neon is rough because she oftentimes leaves your opponent a reverse target by just whiffing the coin flip. There's a lot of zeros that you do want to play in almost all RWBY lists because you want to play 4 of this. You want to play like 2 to 3 of your clock plus of choice. You have to play 2 to 3 brainstorms, and then other lists are going to be playing clean cuts as well. And then this card comes in and just clogs your hand and makes things a little rough. But it's also like one of the best cards in the set. It's the best bad card, right? It's the one that you reluctantly keep putting in the sleeve because it's really good when it's good. And yeah, the Shopkeep the way I see it is you're just playing like less cards in your deck, right? Like you play a more focused deck with a more focused game plan, and you have an eject button on your deck at all times. And so you don't need to play a lot of the filter cards that you would otherwise. Like right before you may like slot 2 to 3 Ironwood in because you're like, I need to fix my hand or I need to find cards. While with the Shopkeep package, you're like, well, I have the ability to mill my deck, I have the ability to find cards off the top. 5 cards is a lot. You'd be actually surprised. This card is like overperformed beyond belief. I actually play 4 of it, and I play 3 of the Shopkeep. I think this card can go down. You could increase the count of something else. Let's see. But yeah, before I was playing like Piras at level 1, and it was that was like a little clunky finding the red. And then I was also playing Nolans, and I was putting down the Nolans or the Piras instead of the Weiss level 1, which is actually over here. And it doesn't feel bad, right? It doesn't feel bad when you put a Nolan on the board and stun a card and then bottom deck a card, but it's not as good as like milling 3 cards off of the top of your deck and then holding like a 7k on your board, right? It's not as good as the other options. The Pira is cool when you're able to like draw ditch and then filter your hand a little bit, and it's like stuff that doesn't feel terrible, but when you're able to just consistently put down this and play like a very streamlined game plan, I think that is worth the loss of the slight utility that those other cards provide. In fact, I went for such a streamlined build that I'm playing just 4 stock healers. Because I think that when you're playing this Pira package at level 2, you want to be able to elongate the game as much as humanly possible. And play into that big board, winning lanes with the Weiss. You got the Hand Encore assist behind it. Only 1 copy of the RWBY Climax. I play the RWBY because she heals, and then we have the off finishers to pair with the Pira. Let's do a card by card. I mean, like, I kind of already talked about a lot of these, right? You got Pira, you have to play 4. We don't play the bomb to put into memory, so you're gonna have to find a way to get these into memory if you want to in the game. Usually you'll know ahead of time, because this is more matchup dependent, right? You're gonna be wanting to do this against Mushoku. You're gonna be wanting to do this against decks with anti-chain or anti-damage, or that need like trait like board conditions for different effects, or that might have battle tricks. So those are the games that you'll be willing to give up slots with this card. Also, just going to memory for free compression helps elongate the game in the mid game when like suddenly you have 3 less cards in your deck. Shopkeep, a necessary evil for this card. I think you can cut this down. I almost don't think you can cut this down. This card has overperformed beyond my wildest expectations. Liren goes into helping us mill our deck. If you play with like the Cinder package and stuff, you'll find that unless you have the Climax or a spammable, you cannot mill your deck. This card being a 3-card mill that also helps color fix. As you see, we don't have a lot of yellow. We only have 4 yellow cards. It can help just find stuff to put into your clock. It can also help fill up the grave for its own selection. It outperforms every other Clock Plus in this set by a wide margin in testing. 3 seems for the best on Shopkeep. Yeah, I mean, I think it does too, because otherwise you're upping the count of cards to find the Shopkeep, in which case you're then losing the benefit of the package, right? Of the fact that this doesn't eat up board slots. You're able to slap down triple combo, have a Brainstorm on board, and then fish for a standby to bring out this, or whatever else you want to do, right? Neon Cat, necessary evil. It's not even that good in the meta right now. I think there's like Slime has a chaser, but like you don't really care about a chaser with this list. Like you just give your opponent a plus, who cares? It's not as egregious as it was when Kagi was running around and clean cutting an actual good card. Outside of that, I don't think there's like any deck that plays clean cut, right? There's like 7 Deadly Sins, that's not a real set. RWBY itself does, but if they're playing the 8-gate list, they have to open a Brainstorm, which is a 3 of, plus a clean cut that's a 3 of. And the chances of them opening both to actually And that doesn't even, this doesn't even answer that. Never mind. This doesn't even do anything. This only stops chasers. Chasers into like clean cut headaches. This card's terrible, but it's also feels good when it's good. Climax Swapper. I think that if you can cut this, you can start putting more cards like this in the deck. You can start putting like maybe a 2/2 in, maybe a couple Pyrrha Bombs. JoJo's a funny set. They don't have a chaser, do they? They don't have anything you care about bottom decking with this. Oh, they have the Twin Driver. They have the Twin Driver, Bucharty. Yeah, wait, never mind. This card might be broken, but this card also answers that card. Just puts in their clock. Yeah, Climax Swapper's too good, especially in a deck like this where we play a split Climax lineup. It helps you pivot to this for only 1 stock. It's very nice. Ironwood, Necessary Evil. Now, this does help dodge clean cut, because it does bounce back. Sometimes, like half of the time it dodges it. Necessary Evil, because it is like a very good filter tool, but also it's terrible. So, it's terrible for a multitude of reasons. Like I already said, the power, the board slot. So I like to have one, because when it's good, it's good. But I don't want to like have it clogging my hand and forced to use it every turn or something like that. Draw Brainstorms, because we have a +1 Brainstorm at 2, and the deck speed from this mixed with the hand on core support is more than enough in the games that I've tested. Also, this is something important for people to know. Do not crutch on first deck Brainstorms. It's nice to have them, but I'd much rather have a 5-card Draw Brainstorm than a 4-card Salvage Brainstorm on first deck, because first deck is like, it's unfavored. It's like under 50% chance to hit a Brainstorm. So it's, yes, you lose selectivity when you hit, but the mill more than makes up for it, and the hand encore to go with the Weiss. And it's also important because, like, the Weiss, right? Like, look at all these zeros, right? They give you this thing, they give you... This thing's a little bit nicer. This thing's really good when they give you this. If they give you this, it's terrible. These feel decent. But, like, right, this helps you filter the garbage that you can get here into a copy of your combo, or this. Love bottom decking my opponent's first deck. Yeah, it's kind of nice with the what is his name? Nolan? Yeah, that's pretty good. But it's so weird with like the board setups, and also the bottom deck isn't good against Mushoku, so it's another problem right now. If you look at like the top list, was it 6 Mushokus in top 8? I think. I know not all of them are on 8 standby, but you're going to be running into 8 standby Mushoku a lot. You're going to be running into a lot of different standby decks. Some people are playing 8 standby RWBY, or decks that just don't care about getting Nolan, right? Like if they're playing 8 gate RWBY, they just don't care. They're just going to break your board. Dust, I've already went over this. I don't want to talk too much about these two. The power line on this is very relevant. If you are against, also on the 1/0 Tai Yang yellow card. Oh, so that card, I didn't talk about it. The 1k power is very nice. It helps with the board breaking. The problem is it's in yellow, so that's a little awkward. I do like the hand fixing in it. It helps you find climaxes in a deck that otherwise really can't. It's like one of those cards that I feel like is really rough to put into a list that's actually just really good. That's kind of where it's at. It's in an unfortunate color, I think. But you can slot in yellow in the set and feel fine, I think. But it's going to be less good than something like this. The power lines on this, though. 6k, 7k behind this, right? And you get to fish for this a lot better than an 8 standby deck would. And you're able to reliably field this without feeling bad if it's like loses its lane, because it only costs 0 stock. Unlike a 1/1, when a 1/1 doesn't hold board, it feels terrible. 7k is huge. Kagi is out of the meta, so that's unfortunate. But Slime is still in here, and it sits at 5/5. It bounces back and goes to 7/5. Okay, 7/5 is bigger than 7. But, counter. Boom. You win the lane. And after that, like these other lanes naturally hold board against the slime matchup. It can be annoying for other decks as well. You know, 6 7k can be pretty beefy, especially when backed behind the 2k counter. Mushoku's a little rougher, but the 7k is a little bit nice because they only sit at 8-5 after a standby, so you can maybe hold off one lane with the counter. And then also the top check 3 on this helps you side attack profitably. That is another unique thing about this combo. You can side attack while stacking soul triggers to get 2s in without losing board against the 1/1s. That is actually massive. Because other decks, you're forced to crash, or you side for 0 damage and then like slowly fall behind. This, you can side attack, hold your board, threaten counter unless they hit standbys, and then get a little bit of like longevity off of this and have a cushion on your first deck. And that's why we paired the 2k counter. Also, we don't want to be using stock because the Piras with the Blakes are how we're going to be replenishing our stock in the mid game. One Jean, it kind of shares a role with this thing. It gives this thing hand on core, the Pira, but you can just play the Blake and give the Pira hand on core until you get to the Jean. So one of it's like all you really need, while the Rabbit we play 2 of because it feeds into our board focus game plan and helps build huge boards. Not huge, but decent boards, right? 8 standby decks will eventually run you over as the game progresses if you don't start playing into the Piras, but outside of that, you can still hold some fight with this until then. The memory shoot counter, as I said, I think it's very good in English right now. It helps stop some really degenerate things, like, right, 8-choice slime is not a good deck until it starts popping off on you and they're on like their 6th attack for the turn, and you can cancel like 5 times, it doesn't matter, you're still dying if they decide to go into that combo and you don't have something like this. But when you have something like this, those decks are terrible and they can't really do much. The Blake early play, like I said, we play 4 because in a deck like this that doesn't have a lot of finishing power, right? The best thing you can do for a finisher is this, or like a burn 3 and a claw kick, neither of which are really good at closing out the game. That means you want to make the game longer in the mid game and have bigger pushes there. So playing 4 Blake early plays feeds into that. You can just play this down turn after turn after turn. At even 3, 1 goes to stock, you put 1 down, 1's in grave. You just want to have 4 of it. Pira, you want to be slamming down as many turns in a row as you can as well, which is why we play 3. Sometimes you may even play over a Pira just to stand by 1 out again for the extra damage with the shuffle back, because the shuffle back is so huge. The decompression from this cannot be underestimated, and it will help with the stock healing at making your opponent's game far worse than yours. And also punishing them for poor deck states, right? Like, they go down to like 3 cards left in deck, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm gonna eat 3, and suddenly you make them eat 8, and then or you make them eat like 6 even, because sometimes it struggles to get the final little push with the damage because of the standby. But you can at least like shove 5 useless cards in their deck too. So like, even if they don't eat the full 8, they're drawing dead cards, and you know, hopefully hindering them. And like I said, the RWBY's there to break, and I've already went over the little package, the finishing package. So yeah, I think that's it. I don't really have anything else unless people have questions about it. I feel like I've done my piece. I've talked about RWBY as a set. The reason it took me 4 months to talk about RWBY is I feel like I have to test everything, and I only get a locals once a week or every other week, and I feel like there's a lot of stuff that I still hadn't tested yet. I took a long time to sleeve the 8-gate list, and when I did, I immediately was disgusted with the selectivity. I wanted to test the Sun Wukong, I wanted to test the Adam Taurus, and I was refining this list for the longest time. But I'm not exactly sure. I don't think there's anything really left to say. It seems that there's not a whole lot of questions left. I hope that maybe I can see this list top. I myself will not be going to Springfest, but maybe somebody out there, well, they don't have to play this list. I would like to see the shopkeep start putting up results. You know, that would make me really happy if somebody out there goes and takes this card, puts it in the deck, and tries it. But since it seems that the questions are done, I think this is Dean signing off.